And good afternoon for my Edwards family. I'm Colonel Gordon, Colonel Laz Gordon, and it's good as always to be with you guys. We wanted to do something a little bit different this time around for the town hall, so that's why all of the pre-work in terms of getting out messages on social media and emails to the base population, because we realized that it's been a while since we've actually talked about housing. And that's one of the issues that's going to impact any airman that lives on this base, or any airman that wants to live on this base. And so in the interest of being transparent leaders, we wanted to kind of provide a forum where you could voice your concerns, the goods and the bads, so that we can hear that and take action on it. So I'm joined with an amazing cast of folks that I look to all the time, and I'll give them a chance to introduce themselves as we go through. But I wanted to kind of lead off a couple just kind of thoughts, right, just to go through this. One, quality of life matters, right? You've heard me say this many, many times before, but this is our third assignment back to Edwards Air Force Base. And more so than many other issues that we deal with, having good quality of life on this base really matters. And so we really value your input to us back and forth on this. So that matters, right? That's important. Two, especially after the year that we've all gone through with respect to COVID, the mental health, those sorts of issues, they matter as well. A lot of that kind of stems to what's available on the base, what can you do from a recreation standpoint, how do we open that back up again? And so again, we've been overdue in terms of having this forum back and forth because we really do want to hear from you in terms of what your thoughts are on this. Last is, again, I'm sitting here in my role as the Vice Wing Commander, but for today, right, I'm also sitting here in my role as a resident of this community, right, your neighbor. And believe me when I tell you, the people sitting around the table here with me or sitting around the room with us here, they are absolutely dedicated professionals to being able to make this work for the families that live on this base. You will find no finer people, no more people to be able to get this kind of going. So with that, without further ado, what I wanted to do is I wanted to have everyone just do a brief introduction if you haven't had a chance to see them, so that you know who they are, what they do for you as a member of the Edwards family. And then at the end of that, I've got a couple of pre-prepared topics, and then we can chat and just do kind of banter back and forth in terms of questions. This one's scheduled a little bit longer than normal, so we're scheduled out to 2:30. We're certainly happy to use all that time, but if we're out of questions, we can certainly stop early if people need to. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass the microphone down the line here. We have so many people here today that we're actually out of microphones. So I'm going to pass this down to Chief Thompson, who's representing MSG, and then we'll just kind of go from my right all the way over to the left to Mr. Judkins, our CE Director. So with that, I'll pass this on.
Circle. So we'll pass this along.
Christina's good.
Roach. I'm your resident advocate here. I basically am here to advocate for the residents. So if you have any issues with Corvius or the MHO, I'm the one that you come to. And I sit over in the building where the MHO is as well, so that's where you can find me.
My name is Stuart Campbell. I'm the operations director for Corvius here on base. I've been here for about 3 years, and I really enjoy working with this group of people to just keep making housing better, and I'm excited to hear what we have to talk about today.
And Chief?
Chief Worth-Swanigan, Command Chief. As always, here to serve you all. I too am a resident, so I'm glad that we can come today and rehash this important topic.
Good afternoon. My name is Melody Couch. I'm the Chief of Housing for the Air Force. I have a fabulous military house.
As a community, so that when fallout money happens, typically at the end of the fiscal year, so August, September timeframe or so, if we are so fortunate in this particular year, now's the time where we know we've heard from the residents, we understand what people want, and we are quote unquote shovel ready because we would have done all of our due diligence from beforehand, and we can go forward. The options that we're going to show to you, the reality is if we wanted to have a splash pad, these are essentially the only locations where they can go. Some of that has to do with how construction money is colored. Some of that has to do with existing utilities that are available at this particular spot. You just can't create a splash pad in the middle of nowhere. Some of this also has to do with adequate parking that's available once you show up to actually take your kid to the splash pad. So what we wanted to do is, one, just kind of step through these options really quickly. And then when we're done with that, we'll show a Survey Monkey where you can go, you click on it, and then you can give us feedback in terms of what you would like. You can select one of these options. You can also tell us, you know what? I've seen it, I've heard it, not interested, don't change a thing, right? And that's a completely valid option as well. So with that, I'm gonna go to option 1A. And apologies, we don't have a monitor here that I can see, so I'm using my smartphone to pull this up. This is the Club Muroc option, 1A. One of the issues I'm learning in this job especially is the issue with lifeguards. So whenever we have folks, hanging around a government pool, like an FSS-provided pool, by regulation, we have to have lifeguards available to go do that. And what I'm learning is that we don't necessarily have a lot of lifeguards to go around. So one of the downsides of having the pool here at the club is that we can only open it when we have sufficient lifeguards that are available to actually staff it and man it. So one option was, in option 1A, we essentially removed the pool as you currently see it up here at Club Muroc, and in its place, we put in a full splash pad, which we'll show you a couple examples of that when it's there at the end. The pros of that is that with a splash pad, we don't have to have a lifeguard available, and so as a family member, a resident of the community, you can come up to Club Muroc for lunch on a Tuesday, and if you wanted to bring your children up here, you could. You hit a button, the splash pad turns on, the kids love it, you get to have something to eat, et cetera, et cetera. So that's option 1A. If you wouldn't mind, can you go to option 1B? Okay, thanks. In option 1B, this is like a hybrid. So in this scenario, we leverage some of the existing utilities that are here for the pool, but we partially cover up the pool, so the pool itself would be a bit smaller. And in that spot where we had part of the pool, now that area becomes the new splash pad. The pros of this one is that it still preserves a pool up here at Club Muroc for some of the older kids that want to jump in there. So it's a little bit of that. You still have a splash pad for the little ones. The downside, and again, we're still bound by Air Force regulation. Even if there's a fence or a barrier in between the splash pad and the pool, we still have to have a lifeguard on duty. So in that scenario, you would have a splash pad here, but it wouldn't be open to you unless we had a lifeguard. Traditionally, that's first Fridays, maybe sometimes on the weekends to be able to support that. But it's certainly not going to be Tuesday afternoon for lunch. You're just not going to see it there. So that's kind of the pros and cons of option 1B. If you move on to option 2 for the Sonic Splash Pool, thanks guys. So for the Sonic Splash Pool, this is the pool that is down by the youth center area with the water slides, et cetera, the lap pool that's next to it. So we could certainly put in a splash pad there. We certainly have all the utilities in place, all the plumbing is there to go do it. The downside of it is, well, you only get to use it if you're all the way down there. One of the reasons why people seem to like the Club Muroc option is, well, you're here, there's a restaurant, we have Fogelman's Lounge, all those things that make the adults kind of happy. You lose that when we go down to a place like the Sonic Pool. But the other side is, it's a full pool, there's a slide, and we would just add another splash pad to there, so you could use it as kind of the recreational pool on that one for 2. Let's see, and then the last one, if you could go to the last slide, the Arnold Park option. So right across then from where we have Fam Camp, and kind of right next to where all the softball fields are, is Arnold Park. So we could put it there. There is plumbing. There are some options that are available there to be able to put it in place. The downside is it's just a splash pad. There's no pool. There's no food. There's really nothing else around there. So you'd have to go to Arnold Park, but specifically for that purpose, unless you're playing softball or anything else along those lines. An additional thing to think about for these options is, again, when Edwards was constructed, there was no such thing as Mojave Sky, which now we have that. And so we've just recently opened that up, and again, thanks Stuart for the lean forward on making that come together. So we have this interesting scenario, right? This is actually a very good problem to have. We have this interesting scenario where we have this beautiful brand new pool over at Mojave Sky that is now available for residents on the base. We still have the Club Muroc pool, which traditionally that's been like a Friday evening, first Friday like what we would have today, where there's food, there's drink, and there's something for the kids to go do. We have Sonic Pool, which has traditionally been like the kids go there to have a good time. And then we still have the Oasis Pool over the Oasis Center, which is sort of like our fitness pool. That's the pool that you go to swim laps back and forth. So it really becomes a question of, is that sufficient water sports and aquatic activities? Or if you would like to have a splash pad, where would you like it to go? So if you wouldn't mind bringing up the SurveyMonkey piece, the link to that. Thank you. So what we're really asking at this point, and Ms. Roach, Christina Roach, brought this up over social media. We've brought it up with our residents council just to kind of get a sense of where people are at. And now we're asking you. This is one of those types of choices that we didn't want to make that unilaterally without having input from the people who live here to get a sense of what you're thinking about. So if you go to the SurveyMonkey link, you'll see in there you have the option to vote. You can either vote, hey, don't change a thing. You can vote for one of the options that we just talked about. And it also gives you the option to leave comments in there as well if there's something you want to provide amplifying data to let us know kind of where you're at. And Christina, what's the cutoff time for this and any other thing to add on to what I was talking about?
We could probably leave it open for about a week.
Okay, so about a week?
Yep.
Okay, so I'm looking at my watch here, and so we're looking at next Friday. We'll call it close of business, so 1600 on next Friday. If you wouldn't mind, just add into there, provide your comments, provide your vote, but then that way we've heard your voice about what you would like to do heading forward. And then Christina, was there anything else that I missed or something I said wrong to be able to provide amplifying information on that?
No, I think you covered it.
Okay, got it. Excellent. Cool. All right, so that's one of the first prepared topics. And then Jeremy, how are we doing with questions so far?
We've got a couple, sir.
Okay, go ahead.
So the first question is, what is the base planning to do to help the housing situation this PCS season?
Okay, so the question, and again, I'll repeat that since Jeremy's off camera and you might not have heard him through the microphone, but if I heard it correctly, the question is what is the base planning to do with respect to the housing situation for this PCS time? Am I getting that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, got it. Okay, I'll provide my perspective, and then we can certainly pass it around, or folks that want to provide other perspectives as well. Hear you loud and clear, 100% loud and clear. In my second tour here at Edwards Air Force Base, I lived in a TLF for 8 months because at that point, the field grade officer ranks, they just didn't have housing availability. And so we essentially lived in a temporary house for 8 months, so almost a good chunk of the first half of our tour as an operations officer for the F-22 squadron. So I hear you 100% loud and clear. That option, by the way, is becoming increasingly difficult just based on the pricing that's happened now with our temporary lodging facility gone up. So again, I hear you 100% loud and clear. Here's the bottom line is that for decisions that were made a long time ago, the inventory of homes that we have available on the base is just dramatically reduced from what it used to be. And so what that means is that we have increased wait times for certain rank bands that we have for folks that are coming onto the base. And that's just the reality. I wish I could snap my fingers and make that different, but I'm trying to be as honest and as transparent as I can about the situation that we are all facing when it comes to getting a house on the base. Here's what we've worked together, and Stuart can provide some more detail along the lines is, we want to be fully transparent, especially with people who are awaiting a home in terms of what wait they can expect to see. So the expectation is, as they're dealing with our military housing side and the Corvius side, through Melody and through Stuart, that we are transparent and we are honest brokers so that you as a family, you can make decisions based on the best available data that we have so that you can make decisions about what you want to do. Did you want to wait for a house, or are you going to take a home that's going to be off base? So that's kind of my opening statement from there. Stuart, Melody, anything else to add on to that?
So I would just add that I'll share Colonel Gordon's sentiment that we know that there's just not enough houses. That's the math, right? And we're working hard to try and find some longer term solutions. On the short term for this PCS cycle, we know communication is really important. We're working hard to try and be good at that. Ultimately, we are human. I'm sure there is a mistake made from time to time. But if you ever feel like you don't have a clear picture of your housing situation, how long it's going to take, or that you're not getting what you need, please reach out to Corvius, reach out to Christina as the resident advocate, reach out to Melody as the director of the MHO, and all of us are here to try and make that the best experience we can in an environment where we know it's very challenging because there's just not enough housing. Melody, is there anything you want to add to that?
Yes, so let's look at the other side of it, housing in the community. If housing is not available when you get here, or you choose to move into the community, the first and most important thing you need to do is come to the military housing office. I have a team in there that goes out in the community and they inspect available homes. They have tools to teach you to look for appropriate housing downtown. We have websites that you can utilize. We have tools like crime mapping so that you can look at an area and decide if that's some place that you want to live. We have people that are there to help you with that, and we have lists of apartments that are in the area. Now, we're not going to find a home for you, but we're going to give you the tools to find one yourself. And keep in mind that we, the government, are fully aware of the housing issue. And if somebody PCSs straight to the base and is forced to go downtown or goes downtown because that's what they want to do, and are later offered a home to move on base, there's a good chance they can receive a government-paid move back on base if they have not received one before. So we're trying to do the best that we can in a difficult situation. But my team is out there constantly looking for rentals and trying to find the best ways to help everybody out that's coming in.
Okay, and then one last thing, mainly for our PA and Media Fusion team, I'm getting some real-time information that this isn't broadcasting on Facebook. I'm watching it right now. Okay, no worries. Thanks, just for monitoring that and keep it going. So thanks, I appreciate that. Yeah, so in other words, what we're trying to tell you is that we're trying to set expectations. I totally understand because, again, my family lived it. You know, we didn't like living in transient quarters and not having our stuff and trying to fight through storage and all those other kinds of things that we had to deal with. So I hear you 100% because, again, I'm not telling you as like some dispassionate leader, you know, away in an ivory tower someplace. This happened to my family in our second tour coming in here. So again, we hear you. Essentially what you're hearing is we're here to help in terms of finding options off base. We're here to help in terms of being transparent with what's happening here. I will tell you, I mean, it's not going to change anything, at least for the near term, but there have been, at least at this point, very basic discussions and talks about how do we improve the housing inventory that's available on base. But those are talks really at this stage and nothing that I can point to concretely directly and say, yay, verily, it's going to happen by this date. But it's understood and we hear you loud and clear. What other questions come in?
Can
Oh,
I
I'm sorry.
add
Yeah,
something, sir?
yeah, please go ahead.
In case you're not getting the idea, our leadership is very concerned about this issue, and they have reached out through the Air Force. And first step that's going on is a housing market requirements study has been contracted out. And that's people that will come out that understand the housing. They will survey what we have on base. They will survey what's available in the community. Our leadership is looking for this, attempting to get additional housing. So they hear you. They know what you're feeling, and they're working it. And this is in process right now. So nothing is fast, but it's going forward.
Got it.
Thank you.
Nah, thanking you, Melody. Cool. All right, what other questions we got?
Another question, sir, is when it comes to housing and the affordability of the airman tier, is there any advice on managing that expectation for them?
Got it. So the question was affordability, and was there any more details on that? Because that could go a lot of different ways. I want to make sure I'm hearing that correctly.
So when it comes to the affordability for airmen to live off base and to ensure they're not in high crime areas and there's limited availability of rentals in the area, is there any advice for those airmen so that they can maybe group up or make sure that they're living in a safe place that they can manage and afford?
You bet. Melody?
Absolutely. Again, if our airmen will come into the housing office, and they should before they move off base, we can give them information about crime mapping, their BAH, things to look for. We also, on occasion, somebody will notify us that they have, one of our airmen may have a room to rent, so once in a while we know ahead of time of rooms. It is very popular right now to share houses downtown because of the rental rates. One thing that our airmen need to understand, our airmen of all ranks, is BAH is based on a specific type of housing for a specific rank. And that's set by the Department of Defense. So while you can choose to live anywhere that you want, if you are a staff sergeant and you want to go out and live in a 5-bedroom McMansion, you can, but your BAH is not going to cover that. The expectation is something along the lines of a townhouse or a condo for a staff sergeant, and we can go over that with them too. Nothing is going to be easy, but we do have those tools available to help you out. So thank you.
You bet. Thanks. Any other kind of comments around on that one? Okay, great. What other questions you got?
Another question, sir, and I'm paraphrasing slightly, is if privatized housing was available to base civil service and retirees, would that support the potential expansion and funding for housing on base?
Got it. So the question is, if we expanded the availability to include civilians and retirees, right? Does that then in turn create the demand signal to then go back and argue for more housing? So again, I'll put my spin on it, and then Stuart, if you have any additional thoughts on this as well. Again, hear you 100% loud and clear, 100% loud and clear. This is one of those scenarios where Edwards, just because we are almost exclusively a civilian population with relatively small military, this is one of those scenarios that, believe me, your senior leadership, General Higer on up, continuously make this argument that while in the rest of the Air Force you can look at the military population and you can kind of get a good sense of what the base is like, you can't use that same metric when it comes to a place like Edwards. When we say Big A Airman, we really mean that. So it's whether or not you're in uniform or not, you are an airman here in the eyes of your senior installation leadership, and we treat it as such. That message is being carried up. So in other words, it's a great question because it's confirmatory of kind of the way that we're seeing this as well. That message is being carried up of, hey, when you look at our population, from a retention standpoint, from a community building standpoint, we absolutely would love to have our civilian airmen live on the compound with us as well, to be able to expand that up. There's actually a waterfall that's built for that. Stuart, I don't know if you wanted to provide a little bit more details or just your perspective from the Corvius side on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have what's called the waterfall, or OETs, other eligible tenants. So the existing housing program today, if there wasn't enough what's called target tenant demand, which is uniformed military members with families, anytime that demand dips, then we can go through a number of tiers of potential other eligible tenants. That goes from unaccompanied military members down through contractors and some of the various civilian categories on base. One of the challenges, and you heard Colonel Gordon allude to it a little bit, is that the Department of Defense has a set process for how they determine housing requirements, and that's typically centered around uniformed service members with families. So it creates a unique challenge here at Edwards, where there is a lot of demand for non-uniformed folks who are doing very important jobs here on base. And that's something that we're working to try and make sure we help support the wing and message to AFCEC, which is the entity that the privatized program is managed through, to be able to say, hey, there's a need here and there's a desire to be on base. Let's try and find some good ways to do that. And that's also some of the things that Melody's working on with the upcoming housing market analysis, is to make sure the right things are being surveyed so actual housing demand is being quantified for Edwards Air Force Base.
Yeah, thanks, absolutely. And again, to Melody's point, nothing changes fast in this world, but things are changing, right? I mean, you've seen recently that now our civilians can shop in our stores, and for as long as I was serving, that never ever occurred. And so finally to see the Air Force kind of realize that and open that up, I think is the right move heading forward. And again, to your point about can we include civilians in our numbers so that changes, our allocation so that we can make the argument for more houses. Believe me, we are way ahead of you and have been trying to carry forward that message as loudly as we possibly can, because you're 100% correct. They are airmen too, and we want to have them be a part of the community. So thanks for that question. It's a good question. Any other comments on that one going around the room? Okay, great. What other questions we got, Jeremy?
So another question, sir. Does the MHO/this board think that there is sufficient housing downtown currently? And I think the predominant focus is on what do we do for our young airmen who happen to have families to make sure that they are taken care of when it comes to housing and availability?
Got it. So again, Melody, any other thoughts for Chief on this one?
Housing is in the community. We as a base do not have any control over it. However, our leadership has been partnering over the last 3 or 4 years with the cities and with the chambers and talking and telling them that we need more housing down there. We're asking for those contacts. We're pointing out the advantages of bringing in more housing, and there are housing starting. I received a call the other day from a builder that said he has sticks on the ground, that he's building 200 and some odd homes. So it's coming. And our base is a big part of that, because they're out telling them the needs of our airmen and saying, you can do this for us, but we can do this for you. We have these people coming in. They will support the communities. They will support your housing. So work with us. So it's something that the base is working very hard with and meeting people and supporting the industry out there to get more housing. Sir?
Okay, Chief, anything to add to that? Or?
No, nothing further to add.
Okay, it's no worries. So yeah, again, we hear you. Again, in works, so nothing I can point to directly, but again, your leadership has passed up. Are there ways with which that we can actually, increase pay for folks that are here? It's in works. It just hasn't been approved, right? But just understand that the comment about, hey, this is a high cost of living area, not made any easier, by the way, because of COVID and all of the impacts that that's had to the housing market. Not made any easier, oh, by the way, based on some of the housing, or not housing, the employment options that are available downtown, where that's increased greatly, and so that drives demand up for the housing prices. So again, we hear you loud and clear. Again, to Melody's point, we've advocated and pushed as hard as we can up to the senior ranks of the U.S. Air Force for this. It just doesn't happen fast, but again, hear you loud and clear, and I understand exactly what you're saying. Anything else to add to that? No? Okay, good. Okay, what other questions?
Next question, sir. Is it possible to create another fam camp near the old housing area and allow the current fam camp as a pass-through / short-term stay?
Yeah, got it. So this would be a great question, Mr. Judkins, if you have any thoughts on this, and also from MSG's side. I'll provide my spin, but then certainly, happy to hear the results there. So one, fam camp here, and again, I'm learning this, right? I mean, and thanks for all the people in fam camp that have passed up all that information to me. It was really educational. Again, thanks for hosting us when we came out to visit you along the way. Fam camp here is different than any other fam camp I think I've ever seen in the U.S. Air Force. Because of the housing scenario, and there was a time way long ago we had 3,000 plus homes on this base, 3,000. We're dramatically less than that right now. But because of that dramatic reduction in available housing inventory on the base, that essentially converted fam camp into another long-term housing area, even though it's not under Corvius. But we treat it as such, right? So people will show up, they either have RVs or they will go purchase those RVs. And then when they arrive in fam camp, it's not like they're here for the weekend to grill hot dogs and have a good time and then move on to wherever else. They live there. That's their home all the way through. So one of the initiatives that we're working on is how do we expand fam camp? How do we make that larger? So that we can have another means to provide families when they arrive in to be able to have another housing area with which to go stay. CE went through there over the last about month or so with Mr. Murray. And based on the feedback that we were getting from the fam camp residents, CE went through and did a real bang-up job fixing a lot of the things that were broken there and needed a little bit more attention. So really, truly, and honestly, as much as I praise CE, this is one more thing to praise CE on, which was being responsive to the needs of fam camp. There's still some things that we still need to get after there, so it's not complete, but compared to where it was even just a few months ago, it is dramatically better. So our intention is to be able to find ways with which to expand up fam camp so that we can make it larger and to have more options available for families. I'm going to pass the microphone down to Mr. Judkins for any thoughts on that. Go ahead.
Thank you, sir. And yes, indeed, we have plans to expand the FAM camp. CE has developed several concepts over the years that we just, when I say we, the installation was not able to implement because the demand signal just wasn't there to generate the cash to support the construction. But it appears that the demand signal is there now, and so we've pulled the plans out, and we're freshening them up, and we're putting together the package to see if we can go get money from AFCEC, the Civil Engineering Center, or the Services Center in San Antonio, Chief. We'll be getting the money from your folks. Just for a few details, the idea would be to expand the FAM camp in the northwesterly direction from where it is right now, take advantage of the tree line where you have the trees from the old mobile home park, and possibly, if there's enough money available, expand to the other side where the old mobile home park was and really increase the size of the FAM camp. So stay tuned, more to come. As the boss says, nothing happens quickly in our world, but I'm confident it's going to happen this time.
Thanks.
Unfortunately, that was a long way to pass the mic to say I agree with Mr. Judkins. But at the end of the day, our FSS team is actually bird dogging this for the wing and for the base. They're taking it very seriously, and we've made a lot of strides over the last 2 weeks. making sure that we move forward on this effort. And CE's been great partners with us to do so. I think everybody's very, very adamant about seeing this through to make sure that it actually happens. And we're clearly measuring the need for it this round instead of just hearing it from the past and not really measuring it out. So it will be calculated. It will be with some legal hurdles to overcome, and how that competes with housing and how that competes with things in that nature and in that world. But we'll work all that out because we know the needs there, and we'll find a solution to it. Yes, sir.
Excellent. Okay, these are good questions. Keep them coming. Jeremy, what else do you have?
The next question, sir. What are we doing to provide financial relief support for families in transition? With the high cost of TLF and the very limited options of lodging off base, are there initiatives currently in the works to assist families who may or may not have the funds while transitioning?
Yeah, fair question on that one as well. So here's what I can say so far. So, and again, it provides a little bit of backstory so you understand why this was the way it was. But lodging, and this is military bases everywhere, not just us here at Edwards. That used to be under what's called appropriated funds. And so we used to receive money to supplement essentially the cost of the lodging and temporary lodging facilities from Congress. And so it was the reason why you could stay, at our place and spend $60 a night or $70, depending on what it was. That got removed like a year and a half or so ago, where that's no longer an appropriated fund kind of thing. And so what happened now is it's essentially a market rate, right? So that's why almost overnight you saw a dramatic increase in the lodging rates essentially for the same facility to go live in. So that just provides you a little bit of background as to why. It's not like the lodging here at Edwards is trying to be evil and mean or whatever and trying to gouge people. That's not true at all. It is a artifact of just how we went from appropriated congressional funds to non-appropriated funds, and then to be able to kind of cover the costs of what it takes to run those places all the way through. So what does that mean kind of at the airman level? What that means is, you're exactly right, it does become expensive if you are waiting a long time with which to get a house on base. So again, we hear you, we understand completely where that's at. Where I've seen families tackle that before is reaching out to places like Airman's Attic, whatever, to get some loaner, at least some equipment, if you will, or other folks, other families, sponsor families that are in the area that can help out there as well, if it looks like it's going to be a long wait. This is part of the reason why between our military housing office and Corvius, the need to be very transparent with these families as they arrive. That's always important, but it's become especially important nowadays, because again, we're trying to provide the best avenue we can for families to make decisions and choices. Has the Air Force allocated any additional funding based on that situation? No. That's governed by the Joint Travel Reg. There's a thing called temporary lodging allotment, or TLE or whatever, where it's good for like 10 days, and then at the end of that 10 days, you're kind of on your own, and then you have to fund it out of your housing allowance. There's no additional funding for that, and it's beyond the authority that we have here at the installation to authorize any of that to go through. So message received loud and clear. Again, we pass this information up all the time of, hey, this is the impact it's having on our airmen, especially our junior airmen when they arrive. So we hear you. My sense tells me the families that have been most successful navigating that are the ones that have reached out to their sponsors, their gaining units, and saying, hey, this is what I'm hearing, this is the information, what can be done. And you'd be surprised the generosity of airmen that will come out of the woodwork to be able to provide help and support to make that go through. Any kind of experience or war stories around the room of just things that you've experienced with that, of folks waiting a long time and having to pay a lot of money out of pocket while they're waiting?
I mean, I am getting the same questions. I've heard some stories about airmen that are experiencing that, and unfortunately, I haven't been on the ground long enough to kind of get some of the tips and lessons learned that I imagine are going on here that you're referencing. So I would defer to maybe Chief Thompson, who's been here a little while.
Okay, no doubt we've had a couple of these situations come up, and a couple of them specifically. I would say first, thank goodness for all of our great first sergeants on this base and the wonderful senior NCOs that work together to find solutions for the couple occasions that's happened so far. Officially, yes, you have TLF and you have 10 days TLA to go through it. And the way the system is designed is you get the 10 days to do it or find a house off base. If you're not coded as key and essential, the presumption is you need to find a way and find a home off base that fits your price range, which is where Ms. Couch comes in and helping you through that process. Uniquely, we have had a couple situations where that just wasn't able to happen, and we've reached out to Air Force Aid. We've got a grant for one individual. Like the Colonel said, we've had people help out one another. So solutions are there. Experience-wise, here's what I would ask though, and here's my appeal to any senior NCO, any personal leadership out there watching this, is make sure you shore up your sponsorship program. This is very difficult because a lot of our younger sponsors, we try to match them up based on profile and similar identities, so to speak. And so a lot of them don't have the experience to forewarn those that are inbound. A lot of our younger inbound folks don't have the experience to know what they might be walking into. So it's essential for the sponsorship program to be informed and educated, to be able to reach out to those who are coming in and say, hey, here's some unique challenges at Edwards. Does it match your situation, and do we need to help you in any way that's unique to you and your family? Because without our sponsorship program running that way into that fidelity, this is how these situations do come up. Fortunately, it's only been a couple times. Unfortunate for those particular families, but fortunately, it's only come up a couple times, and we've resolved it, and we've worked within the system to do it. I won't say it's been widespread enough to say it's a systematic problem, but I will say our force support squadron is actually running downways through the lodging path to see if there's any other wiggle room we have, but the tiered system's fairly well ingrained. So it's stuff that we're going to keep working through. If you find solutions that we can benchmark, please let us know, and we'll do so. Thank you.
It's key that as leaders or peers, or even if you talk to somebody on Facebook that's coming to the base, have them reach out to the MHO, not only with your sponsorship program, where the sponsorship program can tell them what's going on, but if they reach out to the MHO, we can send them information ahead of time, and we will tell them what the housing is like. We'll tell them that they need to do some foreplanning and be prepared for what they're coming into. Our hope is that nobody gets put into a hardship situation. Yep. So just take care of your people, be airmen, be wingmen, and take care of the people that you hear are coming in. And we did meet with the first sergeants. Met with our first sergeants last week with that message, is to please, they were asking, what can we do to take care of our people? Let them know to reach out to us. Let's get them as much information coming in as we have available from all angles.
And then this is probably as good a time as any to kind of introduce Christina a little bit. So the Air Force writ large, right, recognizing some of the issues that military families have had showing up on a base and having issues with the private housing provider or whatever, they created a new program for resident advocates. Brand new, Christina is the first person at Edwards Air Force Base to be able to hold this position, and so she is essentially defining what that position truly is for everybody. And what we've chatted about a lot often is that she's the advocate, if you will, for the people that live here, but she is also the advocate for the people that want to live here and are waiting to become a member of the Edwards community back and forth. So, to Chief Thompson's point, truly and honestly, at this stage of the game, I wish I could tell you there was something formal the Air Force had, but there just isn't. But at this stage of the game, where that gets resolved is airman to airman, sponsor, right, the gaining unit, an airman fessing up early and saying, I've got an issue, and there are avenues with which to be able to help that to make it come true. Again, that's why we're very hard up with Corvius and our military housing to make sure that things are transparent so that people can make family choices based on the best available information they have. Christina, if you wouldn't mind, if you would just tell them how to get a hold of you, if they're having issues while they're on the wait list or they're having issues, how do they talk to you? How do they get a hold of you?
So the best way would be through email. So my email is christina.roach@us.af.mil. You can also contact me through my duty cell. That is 661-810-8887. I check my email daily. I always have my phone with me, so those are probably the two best ways. I'm also at building 6696. I am partially teleworking right now, so I'm kind of off and on there. So the first two ways would definitely be the best way to get a hold of me.
And if you wouldn't mind, could you just say your email and your number, please?
Email is Christina with a K, Kristina .roach, ROACH, @us.af.mil. And my work cell is 661-810-8887.
So Christina, I mean, why she's so perfect for this role and why she's really embraced this and done a spectacularly good job is Christina was a resident of Edwards Air Force Base, spent a tremendous amount of years serving in the Air Force with her husband, who retired out as a senior master sergeant out of the Security Forces Squadron. So this isn't some bureaucrat that just got appointed to this job. This is someone who is, right, and understands the military family and the community, was a resident of Edwards Air Force Base, still very much connected and a fierce, fierce advocate for the families that come live out here. And so she gets you, she understands you. So she's a great, great advocate for you, for the folks that live here, but then also the folks that want to live here as well. So again, thank you for that. Okay, what else? What other questions?
Next question, Chair. With low availability around Edwards and the Antelope Valley area, will senior airmen still be forced out of the dorms after their 3-year mark?
Got it. So the question is with the low availability of homes, our senior airmen, right? Am I getting that right? Yes, who are currently living in our dorms, going to be kicked out of the dorms once they kind of graduate, if you will, get old enough?
When they hit their 3-year mark, sir.
You bet. So we have 2 chiefs here. I'll defer for them for that kind of answer, just to kind of get their thoughts. Chief, what do you have on that one?
I've already heard that our inventory is extremely low, and so we will have to try to accommodate the incoming airmen straight out of tech school, as they need a place on base more so than someone who's been around a little bit and kind of knows the lay of the land. And so from what I understand, they're tiered when they're in the dorms. And so as you get to tiers 3 and 4, it's probably a little closer to your time to move off in order for us to meet the needs of the airmen that are getting here brand new. So.
And believe it or not, so Miss Melody, she does dorms as well, right? Any thoughts on that as well?
The chief is absolutely right. Under normal conditions, we try never to force a senior airman to move out. However, when we have young airmen coming in straight out of tech school, they're not equipped in most cases to go directly to the community. So we do go out and ask our more senior airmen to move out of the dorms and into the community. However, if they have a valid reason or a difficulty, then they can speak to their first sergeants, and their first sergeants will represent them. Again, we're not going to put anybody into a hardship, but we do desperately need dorm rooms right now. We are almost full and have very few female rooms. So unfortunately, we may have to ask people to move out.
Yep. And I've also seen it before, and again, this is a talk with your first shirt, run it through your unit. But for residents of the dorms right now, assuming that they've met, the financial kind of guidelines, the maturity guidelines, et cetera, I have seen scenarios where airmen move voluntarily out of the dorms and pick up a place downtown, which then frees up a room for some of the incoming airmen. That's not a blanket, everybody does that whenever. I mean, it's on a case-by-case basis, but I have seen scenarios where that's occurred, and that frees up some inventory inside the dorms as well. Chief Thompson, anything else to add to that? Yeah.
Yeah, from kind of an overall point of view, plan early. And if you know you're coming up on that, make sure that you get with your other airmen that may be in the same scenario, or even other airmen that may want to move out who are a little bit younger. If you have a solid plan put together, by exception, you can go to the first sergeant and say, hey, here's what our plan, here's how we think we can help this scenario. I will say the same thing I said to my poor first sergeant when he brought it to me is we need to lead better. We need to start making sure if we're having this issue in the dorms and this is the way our senior men are feeling as they're approaching their time, we need to prep them better, make sure they understand that this is coming. We need to say this is, as first line supervisors, as first sergeants, as senior NCOs, this is coming, this is on the way. You need to make sure you have a plan. If I had someone that had been in the Air Force for 3 years and didn't have a vehicle, for instance, that's a conversation as a young supervisor I would need to have with that individual and say, I know it's not a requirement, but it is something you need to think about as a professional in the United States Air Force. If I had young airmen and they were coming up on their time in the dorms, my first thought would be, hey, you've been in the dorms for about 3 years now, you have senior airmen on, where are you thinking about moving? Because I know the areas around here. The crime rate mapping is very important, and for planning that is very important. So as frontline supervisors, NCOs, and senior NCOs, we need to get better at prepping our airmen and growing our airmen into that phase of adulthood and independence. So yes, sir.
And just one thing to add, as a complement to taking care of our airmen that are moving off base, we are looking into things like assignment incentive pay that would kind of offset the cost of fueling your car one way or the other and just kind of keeping up with your other expenses. And so we're looking at it holistically and trying to make sure that we capture all aspects of who's affected and how we can help with those impacts. So.
Correct, right? So that's kind of the theme that we're talking about here, which is Edwards is unique. We are not like a lot of other military bases. Your senior leadership understands that and gets that and has advocated and pushed that up and created all the right staffing packages to make all those things that we're talking about here come true. They just exceed the authority of what we can do here at Edwards, and it requires Headquarters Air Force sign off on those particular things. So we continue to scream, literally scream loud and clear at any potential opportunity that we get to be able to advocate for the uniqueness of living at a place like Edwards Air Force Base, to be able to provide airmen the right resources that are there. So they are there. I wish I could sit here and tell you they're approved and they're coming down and here's the actual date. I just don't want to set false expectations in people's minds. So just understand that we do hear that and we're sending that up, and just stand by for more. We'll get you the best information that we can. Okay, what other questions we got coming in?
Yes, sir. The next question is, are there plans for single airmen living in base housing to not be able to renew their lease after their 1-year period in base housing?
So the question is there a plan for single airmen?
Single airmen in base housing?
In base housing, right?
To not be able to renew their lease after their 1-year tenure in that base housing.
Got it. So it's a little bit of a nuanced question, but I'll have Stuart kind of start off with that, and then I'll provide any feedback or any additional information. Stuart, thoughts on that? Good.
Yeah, absolutely. So we had unaccompanied folks move on base when occupancy dipped a little bit towards the end of 2019 and the beginning of 2020 due to a couple of squadron drawdowns and then the travel pause from COVID, during which time you had some unaccompanied folks move into housing. As occupancy has gone back up, and obviously we have a lot of families who are interested in housing, that's where I would sit down initially with Melody, and then eventually we had conversations with Colonel Gordon directly on what does rolling back the waterfall look like? When do we stop allowing new residents? When do we start asking some of the existing single unaccompanied folks to move out? As of our most recent conversation, we do not have any immediate intent to ask single unaccompanied folks to move out at this time. But that is something we're going to continue to evaluate because ultimately housing is primarily here for families. I will give everyone the confidence that if you're an unaccompanied individual and you're in the initial 12 months of your lease, you're good. We're not going to ask you to move out. Once you get past that period, all of the military leases here on base go month to month. And in that period, we could potentially ask you to move out, but have the confidence and the understanding that before we would do that, I'm going to have a conversation with Colonel Gordon to make sure that we're doing that right, because we know it impacts folks either way, and we want to get it right as best we can. And also have the confidence that we're going to give you lots of runway if we do ask folks to move out to go and try and find a housing solution. We aren't just going to say, hey, here's your 30 days, get out. We want to make sure that you have an opportunity, and we're going to do everything we can to take care of you as we do that.
Yep, so spot on. I really don't have much to add to that. Again, there is what we call a target tenant, which is, to Stuart's point, uniform military with dependents. That's our highest possible top tier in terms of we need to make sure that the housing is for that, at least right now, right? I know there's a lot of questions out there and thoughts about civilians, et cetera. Totally hear you. Based on the inventory that we have, that's the priority that we have given the constraints that we have right now. There's two sides to that question. There's the family that's waiting to come on base, and then there's the single airman that lives in the house right now. And I think that's what Stuart was really getting at, which is that we're not going to surprise anybody. And when those initial leases were offered, that was kind of in the clause of, hey, there might come a time where we have a family that's waiting, and we might need to come tap on your shoulder and ask you to move. And so people understand that going in. That's not our going in game plan because we can appreciate how disruptive that is for folks. So far, I think we're okay based on where we're seeing the inflows and the outflows. But at the end of the day, we do have to prioritize, uniform military with dependents for some of these homes. So it's a fair question, though. We evaluate that continuously. Continuously. We know the percentages to the single digits in terms of occupancy rates and what housing and who's where. We know all of that, right? We track that all the time. So it's not going to surprise us, and that gives us sufficient time with which to kind of make the moves that we need so that we're not surprising residents if we have to ask them to move for a higher priority target tenant. Okay, what else? What other questions?
Yes, sir. Next question. Is there any thought to returning additional houses from TLF to Corvius in order to house inbound airmen?
Got it. So the question is inbound, so in other words, the existing TLFs that we have over in Josh Acres is kind of what I'm reading that as, right? And the question is converting that back over to privatized housing, right, so that it increases the housing inventory that's available for leases, right, to go out, right? Am I kind of getting the nuance of that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. So we got the right people in the room for that. We'll start with Stuart as I pass the microphone down to Mr. Judkins, but go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. So the short answer is the way the program is structured, there's some fairly stringent requirements with very good reason to try and make sure that the housing money and Air Force funds are kept separate because privatized housing is intended to be self-sufficient. So it can create challenges for tied to that question of potentially, we call it conveying houses to the program. I won't say anything's impossible, but I would say it would require quite a few folks, probably even above Edwards, to potentially do that. But I will also add that when it comes to housing solutions, our goal is to keep everything on the table and to throw everything we can at the wall and see what sticks, because we want to try and find some ways to improve the housing situation. So to put it differently, I'll never say never, but it's probably more of a question for Mr. Judkins, maybe Chief Thompson, to give a little insight on from the wing side.
Yeah, thank you, Stuart. Stuart has given you a really good rundown on the how time. From a why time point of view, that's an interesting idea. Quite frankly, I haven't thought about it. I don't think we've thought about it, Chief. And we'll take a look at it. I'm sure there are a boatload of unintended consequences, but thanks for the idea. We'll take it on and see if we can make something happen.
Anything to add? Nothing to add? Okay, great. Okay, great. So let's see, we're about an hour into this. We got about a half hour left. I got a couple other pre-prepared topics, so we'll give Jeremy a chance just to kind of collate the questions as they come in. One issue I know is on the mind of a lot of people is the recent issues with the RVs. And so I feel like I owe, right, a good explanation as to why things were the way that they are and kind of what should happen going forward. So here's where we are. When I signed for my house, there was a clause in that contract that talked about having ATVs, recreational vehicles, et cetera, stored out in the driveway or on the side of the street, where I, as a resident, essentially signed on the dotted line saying, I understand that and I will not do those things unless I'm staging, to go out for the weekend, or I just came back and I'm cleaning it before I put that stuff over in the RV lots going forward. When the health pandemic hit, there was a larger issue that superseded that lease that we all signed, right, as resident to Corvius, about the ATVs and everything else in the driveways and the parking lots. And that overriding concern was a health pandemic kind of issue. And the concern was at the time, hey, if a resident contracts COVID, do we have a means with which for them to quarantine or to protect people in the home that maybe are at risk for compromised immune systems? And is there a way to do that where we can disrupt the airman's life as little as possible? And the answer, right, the question that came up to General Higer at the time was, can we use our RVs, if you own them, can we keep those in our lots at our houses so that we can use those essentially as a resident quarantine facility? So given that, right, given the health pandemic, given the emergencies that were on us at that time, that's why the message came down from Test Wing going, yep, for this particular situation, for that clause and for that reason, we will waive this aspect of it, but specifically to help residents that have issues as related to the health pandemic. Now, this is a good problem to have. As we kind of bounced out of HPCon Charlie and we came up to Bravo, and now we're sitting at, up at Alpha. Now, what that has essentially meant is that the health pandemic itself has abated, and that the underlying reasons as to why there was a waiver specifically for RVs, they're gone. They don't exist anymore. And so this came up on a resident council meeting back about March, April timeframe, Christina, roughly. And so we kind of had the back and forth with your representatives on the residents council. These are people that live in the communities and we're speaking up on your behalf to try and get the pros and cons of whether or not we need to keep RVs in the housing areas that went back and forth. I'm here to tell you that for as many people that were for it because of the convenience factor, there were many people that were against it, mainly because of aesthetics, right? That was one reason, not the main reason. There were larger issues in terms of safety. Getting the vehicles, the emergency vehicles in and out of the housing areas. Some of those streets weren't ever really designed to have large RVs there. And I've personally witnessed it where the fire trucks can't respond to some place and they got to go knock on doors to figure out who owns what RV so that they can move it out of the way. There were issues in terms of line of sight, right? As you're driving through the neighborhood, drivers couldn't necessarily see kids that were getting ready to dart out from behind the RVs. And so as many people that were for it, there were as many people that were against it all the way through. So at the end of the day, as the installation, we said, hey, the original reasons as to why that waiver is in place, it doesn't make any sense anymore. So that's why it got removed. And then that's why you saw the message that came out from Corvius to give people sufficient notice, at least 30 days, to say, hey, we're letting you know now that you need to move your RVs and you need to put them back into the storage areas, basically the way that it always was from beforehand. So again, that wasn't Corvius being mean and evil and whatever else. That never happened that way. That's essentially Corvius honoring the lease agreement that we as tenants have signed with the Continental Group, specifically as it relates to RVs and ATVs and that sort of thing. The only reason that waiver was in place was specifically for the health pandemic issue. That clause is still there, by the way. I mean, in the event that someone still has a health pandemic related issue on a case-by-case, one-by-onesie, you can absolutely engage with Corvius or installation leadership, and we can certainly look at that particular case and go forward from there. So that's the broad how we got to where we are right now. Stuart, I know you had some additional thoughts about what residents can do if they're still interested in RVs, but wanted to kind of get your thoughts before closing that one out.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to give everyone a little bit of background, the guideline on this is in your Resident Responsibility Guide, or RRG, which is found on our website if you don't have that immediately handy. And a couple of things to just kind of help everyone understand where that came from. Probably 90% of what you see in the RRG is actually from an AFI originally, and was we were asked by the Air Force when we privatized to integrate that as a policy for how we manage housing. And that is actually something that essentially is, not only is it an agreement between you as a resident and us managing housing here at Edwards, it's just as much an agreement between us and AFCEC to say we're going to go out and enforce these policies for a combination of well-being, safety, things like that. On a topic like this, I always encourage folks, please come talk to us. The more people we know have an opinion on the topic and get to understand those opinions, the better we can make sure the policies work. I will tell you, for this particular policy, there is a pretty significant driving safety factor to it, and that's something that is going to really have a big bearing in how the policy is perceived and whether there would be a change to it. So please continue to bring it up. You know, you have great avenues either through myself or Melody or Christina or through the resident advocates themselves. For anyone who doesn't know who the advocate in your neighborhood is, please email Christina or call her. You got her email and phone number earlier. She can connect you. We have advocates in every single neighborhood on base, and they can bring those to the meetings. As you heard Colonel Gordon say, he is either Colonel Gordon or General Higer is on those meetings personally. Melody, Christina, myself, all of the advocates, so we can continue to make that work as best we can. We definitely understand there are folks out there that really would like to park their RVs closer to their house, but there are good reasons why that policy exists. So, Colonel Gordon, does anything else that you'd like me to add in there? No,
that tracks. And so really at the end of the day, this isn't a military thing. It's not something that's within the authority of either me or General Higer, just based on the agreements, the contractual agreements that residents have signed specifically with the Continental Group as it relates to this. So I think what you're hearing in Stuart's tone is certainly open to hearing feedback about ways with which to do that, but that's ultimately a discussion that happens between the residents and Corvius itself. Now, on the resident council meetings, there were a couple great questions that came up about, okay, so now we're going to put our stuff back in the RV storage lots. How do we get 24/7 access? How do we ensure that our stuff is secure when it's sitting over there? So again, that was raised by your resident council members on there. I'll pass it to Chief Thompson to see if there's any additional, I mean, we're looking at that pretty hard, but if there's any additional information that we can share at this point, just to kind of allay people's fears now that they're putting their stuff back in the storage lots.
So that's not an easy one. When it comes to, we have plenty of storage right now. We have some slots for some of the larger RVs that we may not have enough availability for the demand at the moment. But we're paired up with CE, and we're looking to do a lot of expansion to make sure that we have the right number of slots with the right size slots for what the demand is. So we're taking a look at that right now. We do have 24-hour access. If the electronic keypad goes down, the key fob, check your email. The email you have registered on file with Outdoor Rec, that's where the email will go to say, hey, here is the code for the lock. And make sure that it's out there for you so you do have access even on the weekends or in the evenings. Like, as soon as we know that the keypad is down, the weather here is a bit atrocious when it comes to trying to keep up electronics, especially electronic entry pads. So we're trying to find the solution to that and the right solution to it. We're also taking a look at the security within the campgrounds based on the last residents council meeting, but that only happened a week ago. So one of the to-dos that we're actually checking out right now is how do we go about making sure we stay comparable with the local market. Anything FSS does as far as NAF goes, try to take a look at the local market. We see what the local standards are. We see what the local pricing is. We see what the local quality of the service is as well. And we say, can we ask ourselves, can we stay comparable to that within reason, within prices? Because to get money and to do these upgrades, we have to make money in NAF. This is not taxpayer dollars. These are dollars that we earn every time you pay for something coming to the club, going to the bowling center, going to the golf course, storing your camper. This is how we make the money to do these upgrades. It's not subsidized by NAF at all, or by EPF and taxpayer dollars at all. So we're looking at it. We're looking at it the best we can. And we're going to take a look and review our entire program to make sure we give the level of service and quality that is expected of the FSS. And we'll do the best we can to do that as quickly as possible. Thank you, sir.
Okay, and apologies. Looks like the air conditioning system activated here at the Club Muroc. So, okay, thanks. They just shut it down. So, yeah, if the audio quality wasn't good on the last part of Chief Thompson's point, essentially what he was saying is, we hear you loud and clear. There have been efforts already made with which to help get 24/7 access. If you have an issue in terms of either security issues or access issues, run through FSS. They're certainly responsive to that. To make sure people get it. Did I get that right, Chief?
Yes, sir, sure did.
Okay, thanks. Got it. Okay, we have time for a couple more questions. Jeremy, what do you got?
So I'm going to try to paraphrase a few people's questions. Is there any way to enable Corvius to have greater transparency when it comes to the wait time with potential applicants? And is there any feedback that we can provide on the pricing structure for members of different grades?
So why don't I take that one, Colonel?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so let me talk a little bit about how we calculate wait times. So And
if you wouldn't mind, could you just repeat the question just to make sure everybody heard it?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was essentially twofold. The first was essentially how does Corvius come up with the wait times that we have, and how can we communicate that to folks who are inbound? And then there was also a question around essentially how rental rates are set. Did I understand that correctly? So let me start with the wait list. So the wait list, to start with, how we manage the wait list is dictated in black and white in our agreement from the Air Force. Corvius has no control to, I can't arbitrarily say, hey, I like this person's going to go into housing quicker. We are very much bound to go a specific way. Anytime we go out of order, in case you're curious how that would look, if there's someone that had a hardship situation, for instance, that actually goes to Colonel Gordon to review and approve if we were to place someone out of order. So I share that with you to help you understand that the system is very intentionally set up to be as fair as it can possibly be. We also understand that let's say I was a senior enlisted member and I'm looking to move on base and I'm number 15. And I don't really care that I'm number 15. I care, is it going to be 6 months? Is it going to be 8 months? Is it going to be 6 years, right? It's not 6 years for anybody. So we do the very best we can with the information we have to try and calculate those timetables. So as you can imagine, what we have to do is we essentially have to project how many people we think are going to move out over a given period of time to start to figure out how far out your wait is going to be in that circumstance. Melody and her team do their best to provide us as much information as they can, but there are very stringent Air Force requirements around how much information they can share with us without it becoming a PII issue, among other regulations. So ultimately, we do what we can with the picture we have, but the further out you get, particularly past about 60 to 90 days, then it really gets hard for us to be able to see that because we may not even have folks who have orders yet, or we may not know exactly how many SNCOs are going to move out in October of 2021 because we just don't have that much visibility. Further complicating that problem is, to use that SNCO circumstance, it's not just SNCOs, it's you may have an individual who is in a position, they have an inbound replacement, they're both SNCOs. The person who's outbound is 3-bedroom qualified, the person who's inbound is 4-bedroom qualified. So now you have that wrinkle to it as well, that now it's not even a 1-for-1. Now you got to kind of figure out how that's going to work. So we believe me, we understand the frustration, and we do the very best we can to give the most accurate timetables we can. But because we can't see that full picture, particularly further out, that's where we try and communicate with you as frequently as we can. We strive to try and talk to someone at least once a month as they're further out, and as we get closer to increase that frequency. But it can be a fluid thing is what I'm getting at. So we know it's challenging, but as you have questions, please call our office, please talk to Christina, please talk to Melody. We want to do our best to keep you informed.
And one thing that can help that out, because again, I've been the victim of this, I use that word very carefully, is if you're on that wait list, but you've decided to move off base and to take something else, either Tehachapi, Lancaster, Palmdale, Cal City, etc. Please make sure the Corvius guys know that, the housing office knows that, so that you can be removed off the list. There were many times I'd walk into the old housing office back in those days, and I'd see my name way down that list, but have really not that much confidence as to the people that were above me on that list, if that was really true or not. And so it was difficult to make any planning on that. And some of that is, honestly, that's us, right, as military members, not necessarily communicating back to the housing office guys so that they know to remove the name off the list. So it's not like you're hurting Corvius or you're hurting the housing office or whatever by not talking to them. You're actually hurting other airmen that are waiting to see where they are on that list, and they're trying to make that same plan as well. But yeah, the intent is always, right, again, this is just my experience, because again, we lived this, that you should be getting transparent, open communications, the best available information that we have. It is a fluid list, and it constantly changes. So the expectation is keep calling in. Corvius, per what Stuart's telling you right now, is going to reach out to you just to kind of have a regular connection back and forth, just to make sure that we have the most accurate housing list that we have available, so that we can turn around to the inbound families and let them know what's up. Okay, good question. Anything else to add to that?
Yes, actually, one advantage that goes hand in hand with that is if you have decided that you can no longer wait for a house and you've moved off base and gone into a lease, but you hope to come back on base, let Corvius know. Let them know when your lease is up. They will bypass your name until they will not call you and offer you a house while it's not possible for you to take it. You don't lose your place on the wait list, and they can jump over you to go to the next person. But when it comes time for your lease to be done, they'll start looking for a house for you around that time. So it is a win-win situation. Again, it's like Colonel Gordon said, be transparent. Let Corvius know they're going to work with you. Just because you take a lease off base does not mean you have to give up your place on the wait list. Just let them know you're in a lease, and they'll bypass you.
Yeah, so maybe a way to kind of summarize everything that Melody and Stuart are telling you here is that transparency, like the same way I hold them to account about transparency in terms of how they're talking to you, the same is true on the other side of it. It's got to be a transparent communication on both sides of that. So both from the military family in terms of what your intentions are, but then also from the housing agents here in terms of what our wait list looks like. The more that happens and the more transparent, the more respectful that communication is, the better it is for all parties involved. So we just ask everyone kind of do that so that we can make accurate planning. Good. We have time for a couple more questions before we got to wrap it up. What do you got, Jeremy?
The next question, sir, is there a method or location that members who want to rent out their facilities to other service members that they can go to advertise?
Got it. So we're talking about a sublease. Am I getting that right? So in other words, I lease from Corvius, and then Corvius, I lease to someone else. Is that what I'm hearing?
Possibly, sir. I think it's more specific to if there are residents here, civilians who have purchased homes and they have extra rooms and they would like to rent it out to incoming service members.
I got it. I'm tracking. So in other words, this is for people that live in the local area who want to be able to advertise the fact that they have space available for airmen to come lease. Okay, very different question. Thank you. Melody, what's your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. Call the military housing office. We have a website that is Air Force sponsored that they can put their rentals on, whether it's a whole house or if it's a room or anything along those lines. Start with your housing office and let them help you get it on the website so that our members, as they come in, have access to that. And please call us. We love those.
Yeah, and I'm not in an assignment here, but I did that in a previous assignment where I was coming into a spot, there wasn't any available homes on base, but I went into the housing office, and there were all the people. A lot of them retired, right, that just worked on the base and retired out, and they have a spare room or two to rent out. And that's how I got through F-15 training. I did exactly that. So I totally understand that question now that's being asked. But thanks. Yeah, reach out to Melody. How do they get a hold of you, by the way, to be able to do that? Can you give them some?
The housing office is 661-277-4506, I'm sorry. Or you can call my number direct, which is 661-277-3774, and I will get you in touch with the right people.
And then can you just repeat that just for the folks that didn't get their pencils out in time?
My direct line is 661-277-3774, and then the housing office is 661-277-4506, I believe. Of course, now I messed that up. Or if you've written down Christina's number earlier, you can call her and she will get you to us also.
Great.
Corvius will also give you our number.
Yep. Yeah, that's probably a good theme here is that you look on here, I mean, we're all on the same side, right? I mean, again, this is just a personal kind of put on this. Lived in a lot of different military housing communities all over the country in places like Alaska and Hawaii and whatever else. And I have yet to see a closer relationship between the military side and the privatized housing side than what I've seen here at Edwards Air Force Base. I see all the surveys. I see kind of how that relationship is rated. I hear everything that you guys put out there with respect to any issues that you have in terms of getting work orders or any other questions that go along the way. And to be frank, I mean, as open and transparent as I possibly can, this is a good relationship. This is a very, very good relationship. And so the fact that you see everybody up here on stage, again, we're not itchy and scratchy. We're not fighting one another. We're not against one another. We're all on the same team, which is how do we make housing on this base better for the families that live here? Because, it's a quality of life thing. Go back to the stuff we were talking about in the beginning of this, which is quality of life at a place like Edwards really, really does matter. And so I look at, there have been many times I've called these folks at very odd hours of the night, in the morning, and they've answered, right? And they've been very awesome about doing that, mainly because they're all united about how do we make things better for you, right? And so please, 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 right? If you can't get a hold of Melody or you can't get a hold of Christina or you can't get a hold of whatever, any one of us will direct and get you to the right spot for what question that you need answered. So, please don't lose sight of the fact that we're all here doing that for you because we believe and we want to make this right. Jeremy, what other questions we got? Looking at watch here. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
One of the earlier questions you had asked about the wait list and also about rental rates. I'd like to just quickly
please,
address
go
the
ahead,
rental rates. So rental rates, similar to the wait list, the rental rates that are set for you are dictated very clearly in our agreement with the Air Force. As a matter of fact, pretty much all of that language is in your lease that you sign. So if you're ever curious how that rate is set, read through that language. It's on page 1 and 2 of your lease. But in general, your rent is going to be equal to your pay grade, BH with dependent. There are a couple of unique situations for things like key and essential and that kind of thing. But generally, that's how rental rates are set. And again, it's dictated by our agreement with the Air Force. Corvius does not arbitrarily set rental rates. It is tied to your BH based on that contract. So,
And correct me if I'm wrong, but you're suggesting that regardless of what housing category you are currently living, say if I'm a senior NCO in a junior officer home, it's my senior NCO rate that dictates how much I pay.
yeah, that's a very common question, and you're 100% right that based on how housing on base, military housing is set up, that language is set up and dictated by the Air Force, and with the overall goal of obviously a junior enlisted member pays less for housing than a senior enlisted member. The goal is to provide quality housing for everyone, so this rental rate language is designed to allow the entire program to sufficiently and effectively do that. And again, it's dictated by our agreement with the Air Force.
And incidentally, that message has also been received loud and clear. I fielded a lot of questions on that over my time here in the past year or so as the vice wing. Understand that message has also been carried up forward. So again, more details to follow on that particular piece of it. But again, we do hear you loud and clear about what happens in that scenario that Chief's bringing up. Understand that that's not Stewart being mean old Stewart. That's a larger issue that we're working with a larger Air Force and Continental Group. Okay, we have time for probably about one or two more questions, and then we'll have to wrap it up for the day. What do you got? You have a good synopsis? You're doing great, by the way, so far, so keep it coming.
Thank you, sir. The next question would be, are there any plans to optimize or increase efficiency when it comes to cooling systems in housing?
Okay, so this is the air conditioner question. Again, I lived this because the first night or two when I lived in the house, the air conditioner broke, and it happened to be on a Friday night at about 6 p.m. When we still had a house full of boxes, and trying to survive through that, and wondering if, hey, is the air conditioner weak or is it broken or what's kind of up? So the question, as I'm hearing it, is the efficiency of the existing air conditioners that are attached to the home. So I'll just speak from personal experience, and then Stuart, if you have anything else to add to it as well. Couple things. One is, here's what I learned. The original air conditioner that I had, what we found is that we were running it so hard that the lines on the inside were freezing. And as a result, the efficiency of the air conditioner itself went way down. And so it wasn't, what air it could push, it wasn't pushing cold. And so, essentially that's what was, causing that to happen. Air conditioner issues, especially now, that is considered an emergency request. Right, that's larger than just a convenience thing or something. So if you call Corvius even after hours, they will respond. So in the scenario that happened to me, they brought out a supplemental air conditioner that I could use to attach to a window, and we put that in the bedrooms just to keep the temperature down so that we could sleep at night and be okay throughout the day. So one was just the technique that I was using to run the air conditioner was actually creating some of the problem. The other is that Corvius was exceptionally responsive to that. And it's not just because I'm the vice wing. I've heard this from so many other folks as well, that they've had an issue and Corvius responds at any hour of the day, whatever, to come take a look at it and then to come bring the emergency air conditioner out. So that's piece one. Piece two is that when they do come out and service the air conditioner, that actually makes a dramatic difference as well, to just come clean out the vents and to make sure that everything is good to go. It actually got to the point in one spot where we did everything we possibly could, and they eventually replaced the entire air conditioner. And that made a huge difference for the house itself. It just so happened the one that I had was just a little bit old, and it was kind of chugging towards the end of life. So even up to that point, right, Corvius was exceptionally good in terms of filling that work order and doing it for my family. But I also know that they did that for a lot of other families as well. Stuart, what you got on that one?
So I'll just add, particularly when it comes to HVAC, as Colonel Gordon mentioned, that's an emergency work order. We're going to be out there within an hour is our metrics. So you'll see us any time of day you call that in, we'll be out within an hour to come address that. As we take a look at air conditioners, there's really two big things that we're looking at right now. The first is we've really broadened out our preventative maintenance program this year. So the homes that we've been by, which there's close to 300 of them now on base that we've gone and touched so far. We've done quite a bit more with the HVAC system this year to try and increase the efficiency and make sure that there's less failures and less disruptions, things like that. I'll also be candid that there's a lot of air conditioners out there that are original. So in some cases, they're in some neighborhoods 20-ish years old. And we know that's an opportunity for us to take a look at potential reinvestment within the program. Very briefly, the way the privatized program at Edwards is set up, there's what's called the IDP, or initial development period, where a number of projects that were laid out by the Air Force at closing were completed. That's things like building the community center. We've renovated over 600 houses here on base so far. In net, that's put about $38.5 million back into housing in the first 8 years that we've been here. As we come out of that, now we start to work on what's called ODP, or out-year development projects. And air conditioners is very much at the top of the list of those projects that we're hoping to bring some reinvestment dollars in and start to do some replacements and some upgrades to continue to improve that for all of you here on base. So
again, thanks for the question. Again, I'm speaking as a resident, all right, and just, hey, it's an issue, right? That happens here. I remember back in the old days when we had swamp coolers back in housing that is no longer here, and that got removed. And even my broken air conditioner, as terrible as it was a heck of a lot better than the swamp cooler issue that we had back in those days. But I hear you loud and clear. Having good air conditioning is a big deal. Really what we're trying to communicate is, hey, that happened to me, right? And when I called out for help, they were there. So if you have an issue, don't suffer in silence, right? Call it out. That is an emergency work order request, especially when it's 100 plus degrees outside, and they will respond, right? And we'll get it fixed and we'll get it set up the right way. So I'm looking at the clock. I think we're out of time. Jeremy, if we get additional questions that come in, we'll have to respond just via text message going back and forth. I wanted to have one other just very quick pre-topic that was kind of built out there, and it's this notion of, it's kind of tied to the schools, but also on the residency side. So for all of our different schools, the elementary school, the junior and the senior high school, our volunteers, our parent teachers, if you will, that kind of run that, we're looking for folks that are interested in doing that for the communities as we get stood up for the upcoming school year. So not this year, this year's essentially completed, but as we go into the following school year, that's a big deal in terms of, again, bringing up quality of life and being a demanding customer, as General Higer says, with our Muroc school system folks. The thing I really wanted to kind of put out there for folks, because again, this is something that my family experienced at Edwards, which is that if you volunteer for things like that, the fear is that you will be the only one that stands up to try to make a difference and to volunteer to run PTOs and that sort of thing for the school, and that very quickly you're going to get burnt out, tired, overused, you're going to get exhausted, you're going to get bitter about life because you're going to feel like it's you versus the world. We hear you, right? That's what happened a bit to my family in our second tour while we were here. To alleviate that, the thing that, if you're interested in that sort of thing, the thing that you need to be aware of is that we now have a thing called Crisis Task Force Schools, CTF Schools, that's chaired by General Higer himself, that has our academic, we talk a lot with, the Muroc school system. You've got MSG that's on board with that. You've got myself. You've got General Higer. In other words, you have a team that's already in place and has been working for a number of months on your behalf that will help you, right, in the performance of those duties. So you're not alone, right? You're joining a pretty high-powered team that has a lot of influence to be able to make things better for our children when it comes to schools on this base. Again, if you're interested in that sort of thing, again, you can reach out through Muroc, you can reach out through our school advocate, through Candace, and she can get you connected up to the right folks if you're interested in becoming that person for the elementary school, the junior, and the senior high school as we go into the following year. So again, we just wanted to put that out there since we know we've got the right audience sitting on the line if that's something that you're interested to go do. So again, I wanted to thank everyone that joined us here. This has been good. This has been outstanding. Again, the whole thing what we're trying to communicate is that we care. We're here. There isn't a single question that we received that we thought was dumb or stupid or turned down or anything else like that. We heard you. People are responding. We've taken a couple action on some things in terms of some further questions that people might have, and that we're here and that we're one team, one fight in this all the way through. So again, I wanted to thank you for joining us. This will be recorded for the folks that didn't get a chance to join us live. If you have any additional questions, by all means, reach out to any single one of us sitting on this line right now, and we will absolutely help you to get to the right answer. I wanted to wish folks a very happy weekend. Corvius pools are open over at Mojave Sky. That was one of the favorite things I saw last weekend, was just seeing families over there having a good time. So again, much thanks for leaning forward on that and getting that open. And with that, we wanted to wish you a happy time, and we'll see you next time.